Hey guys, it's Scott with Scottie B Cards, and in this video I want to answer the question, what is wrong with Juan Soto? So what's going on with Juan Soto? He was supposed to have been the National League MVP this year. That went to a 34-year-old potentially in Paul Goldschmidt. If it doesn't go to him, it might go to another 30-something-year-old in Nolan Arenado, Manny Machado, or maybe Freddie Freeman. Either way, we were expecting this 23-year-old superstar to take the next step to be the National League MVP, and he just hasn't done that. And overall, he's hitting, I believe, 246, doesn't have quite as good of a slugging percentage, slugging numbers in general, and he's just not quite doing the same thing as he's normally done. So what's going on with him? In this video, I spent a couple hours on my Sunday diving into this so I could answer this question for you. I had an idea of what was going wrong, and I was right and wrong in some ways, and I'll explain what happened to Soto and why I think he's regressed a little bit and if I think he can bounce back or not. So let's look at his numbers. The first thing I want to tell you is Juan Soto's not having a bad year. He's actually having a pretty dang good year, but for his performance, it's a bad year. I think we're kind of seeing the floor of Juan Soto this year. I think the floor is a little bit lower. He could have a little bit lower on base percentage if people were attacking him more, but overall, he has 5.6 WAR. He has an OPS plus over 150, which is really, really good. And it's just his batting average is a 243. His slugging percentage is a 457. He's usually about 70 points higher for his career, which is pretty crazy that he has a 70-point difference here. And his OPS is significantly different. The thing that we're seeing though across baseball is league offense across the entire league is suppressed. And so an 861 OPS for any given year is a very good year, but not an elite year. This year, it's basically trending to be an elite year. There's hardly any players over 900 on their OPS, and I believe the National League leader is Paul Goldschmidt at 988, but after him I think it's 920. There's a big drop, and so because of that, this really isn't that terrible. The thing that really stands out though is he's won a batting title. He had a 313 batting average in 2021, so batting title, almost won the batting title last year. I think he lost to Trey Turner, and then this year he went to 243. So what happened? Why is he not quite hitting the ball like he should and like we're accustomed to seeing? One thing I do want to point out before I answer that question, his defense is one reason why his offensive numbers are even harder to comprehend, because his defense is another thing that has really hurt his WAR totals. If we look at his defense, he has about negative 0.7 WAR so far this year. He's actually done a little bit better in San Diego. He's been positive, does not pass the eye test yet. I've seen him misplay some balls out in the outfield. Also made some great plays, but overall he's been a little bit shaky. But he's been one of the worst defenders in all of Major League Baseball as an outfielder. I think he actually might be the worst. He was at one point this year. And because of that, hurts his WAR. If he would have been just a league average defender, this would be around a 6 to 6.5, just for that purpose right there. So that's one thing I did want to point out. He's having the worst defensive year of his career by far, and according to outs above average, defensive runs saved. According to defensive WAR, he's actually not having the worst. That could have been 2020 or 2018, but this year has been tough according to the other defensive metrics, which I did not pull up too much in this video. Next thing I do want to talk about, let's look at some more stats. I'm going to be a little bit stat heavy in this video. I'm going to be really quick through this video to not last forever, because I could have this go for 20 or 30 minutes, but I will also discuss cards at the end and what I kind of think is going to happen. Let's look at his batted ball profile. So you're going to see here that his walk rate, his strikeout rate is basically identical to his career. He has not really changed much there. You can even see that over here. 20% is basically where he's lived. 14% strikeout rates where he's been the last 3 years. It's almost identical. But what's changed is his fly ball percentage. His fly ball percentage was 15% in 2020, 20% in 2021, and now it's about 27%. So up 7 to 12% from his peak. In my opinion, what peak Juan Soto was, his ground ball percentage is actually lower and his line drive percentage is lower. So he's actually getting underneath the ball quite a bit more when he's trying to get some power. And I'll explain why that's a big deal. One other thing that's also kind of a bummer is his hard hit percentage is also lower. So he's not hitting the ball hard and he's hitting the ball in the air. That does not produce offensive numbers, because if you're hitting the ball softly into the air, you're gonna have a lot of flyouts. And I do also want to show, if we come down here, you're going to see his expected batting average is 268. These are his expected numbers. His average this year, I believe, was 246. So he is being a little unlucky is what this is telling me. We can also look at his BABIP. So expecting batting average just takes into consideration how hard the ball was hit at what launch angle and things like that. Historically, he's done so good at hitting line drives consistently. A lot of his home runs are line drives. They're not moonshots. They're wall scraper line drives, or they go out the opposite way, which are a little bit higher, generally speaking. But this is one thing that is telling you he's not as bad offensively as as we would like. He's getting a little unlucky. If you look at his BABIP is batting average on balls in play. This tells you if he puts a ball in play, what's the batting average on that ball. So all the balls he's put in play, his BABIP is a 249. For his career, he has a 338, a 312, a 363, a 332. Generally, 300 is average. Some players, the way they hit the ball, just in general, they usually have a higher BABIP because they have higher offensive ceiling there. But for Soto, he has a 249 BABIP. That's almost a 100-point drop compared to his average for his career. And that probably is because the batted ball profile he's had this year, which is not good. So I bet Juan Soto recognizes this in the offseason, how he's kind of getting underneath the ball, having a lot of fly balls, but not a lot of as hard hit as normal behind it, and because they'll probably correct that. But this is kind of saying he might be getting a little unlucky as well, because on average, 300 is where your BABIP should hit on batting average and balls in play, and he's at 249. So there are some things that you can see from his expected stats that are showing he's getting a little unlucky. Let's look at his percentile rankings. There is a little bit of a story here. This is his 2022 percentile rankings, and they're really good. This is a very good page for Juan Soto's percentile rankings. You're going to see he's 100 in chase rate. He's basically been the best chase rate in all of baseball since his rookie year, which is insane that he's able to do that. And his walk rate is the highest in all of baseball because he walks the most. He has the most walks, and his strikeout rate's one of the highest as well because he doesn't strike out very often. His average exit velocity is still in the 84th percentile, meaning he's better than 84% of the league, which is good. But if we look at Juan Soto, like past Juan Soto, 94 was 2021 for his average exit velocity, 94th percentile, 90th percentile, and 94th percentile in 2019. So that's a pretty big step back. Same with his hard hit percentage, 95 percentile in hard hit percentage, 93 in hard hit percentage, 90 in hard hit percentage. This year he's 86th. I know that isn't a huge drop, but that's a pretty significant drop for Juan Soto. And that's what we're kind of seeing, is just not the same line drive result as normal. If I go a little bit further, you'll even see this displayed more. You'll see that he's only hit a majority of his home runs. He's only hit, if you go straight to left field, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 home runs to actual left field this year. If we look at last year, a majority of his home runs were hit the left field opposite way last year. The balls were supposedly different this year. They don't fly as well to the opposite field. That could be why he's had a more of a pull focus mentality, but that's really hurt him. He's not able to hit as much power the other way, which has been a bummer. So not a lot of home runs the opposite direction. In 2020, when he had the best year of his career, he only had 3 pull home runs. This one actually is to center field, and a majority of his home runs were all to left field opposite way. That's the best Juan Soto you're going to see, and he's just not doing that. Actually, I want to go back and look at his batted ball profile. You can see his oppo percentage is actually dropped to the lowest of his career. His center percentage is actually dropping, and his pull percentage is by far the highest since 2020. And that's what you're seeing again here with this spray chart. And so that's something you should be concerned about. It's something I'm concerned about, but I think he also recognizes this, and I would not be surprised if he fixes this in the future. The next thing I want to point out is soft contact. Soft contact can be a killer for Juan Soto. In 2021, he was 59th in all of Major League Baseball with soft contact at 15.9%. This year, in 2022, he's 15th in baseball with almost a 20% soft contact rate. And that's what we were seeing up here in his percentile rankings. His average exit velocity is dropping, and that's because of the soft contact. When he hits the ball hard, he still hits it hard, which has raised this higher because it's based off of an average, but that soft contact is bringing it down a bit, which is not going to be good. You have soft contact, whether it's in the air or on the ground, it's an easy way to get an out. Juan Soto is not a speedster. We could look at his percentile rankings again. 31st percentile in speed. He was 60th in 2019. Even last year he was 52nd, but slowest year he's had so far. And if he hits balls in the ground, especially if they're overloading on one side or playing them up the middle, that's going to hurt his offensive numbers. So one thing I do want to point out as well on things I think he's struggling with is he's not hitting the breaking balls in the zone like normal. Breaking balls, Juan Soto has never really hit them as well as fastballs. He's always been a really good fastball hitter, but he's done a really good job of hitting breaking balls still. But we can see right here, Juan Soto is number 5 in all of baseball for having pitches in the zone that are breaking balls, that are actually in the zone. And he's not been able to capitalize on that. For fastballs in the zone, he's 35th. And generally, he's going to be a little bit higher on both these lists because he's been healthy this year and he's been in the top 2 or 3 of the lineup every single day. Really reliable player, has not missed much time. But either way, this isn't very good when he's been primarily a fastball hitter for a lot of his power. And right here, he's number 5 in all of baseball, and this is up a ton from last year. And that's not surprising as pitchers are trying to get soft contact in Juan Soto because he's not really hitting sliders well and a few other breaking balls very well. And one thing I do want to point out as well is ground balls into the shift. The reason why this is so weird looking is because I wanted to show my search filters on how I got this Baseball Savant information. But if we do look, I did plate result, ground out. I did a shift and then not traditional. So it doesn't count as a shift if they're not all on one side, but they do play him up the middle as well. So the shortstop will be pushed over kind of next to second base or above second base. And so they're shifting him in that way, even though it's not counting as a shift. So I counted everything that wasn't a traditional formation for a defense. And he's number 10 in all of baseball for ground balls into this shift. And so he's getting a lot of ground balls and fly balls. The fly balls aren't flying out of the ballparks. He has not as good of a launch angle, not going opposite field as much. And when he's not hitting fly balls, he's grounding out into the shift. And so that's something that's been very different from Juan Soto. Usually he beats the shift. They play him pretty straight up. This year it's really hurt him that they are not playing him straight up anymore because he's not quite having the same result of going the other way like he has historically. So this is what's wrong with Juan Soto. He's seeing more off-speed pitches in the zone and not executing. That's tough because he's getting a lot more off-speed pitches. And I think because he's not performing as well on them, he might be expecting more of them and not capitalizing on the few fastballs he does get in the zone. The next thing is increased soft contact and decreased hard contact. They go hand in hand, but the fact he doesn't have as much hard contact as normal, that's not as good either. After that, increased fly ball percentage. Instead of line drives, he's flying out or grounding out. A lot of his results are this way. He's not having very many in the correct launch angle, which is not really helping him. So because of that, that has also made it so when he does get a strike in the zone, he might get too excited, get underneath it, and now it's in his head, and he's not getting that hard contact like normal. His opposite field percentage is down, which is where a lot of his power historically has been, and he's been a horrible defender. So all these things are what's wrong with Juan Soto. The good thing about all of this is he's been proven to actually be able to fix all of this. So Juan Soto, after this regular season, is going to be taking a lot of breaking balls from other pitchers and a pitching machine to get his timing right there. And once he does, he'll be back to his old self. In my opinion, I do think once the shift is banned, it'll also allow Juan Soto to get more base hits through the holes on the right side. And I do think he will go back to the opposite field like he has lived in for the last 5 years. So that's what's going on with him. Basically, I think he's not hitting the ball quite as square as normal when it comes to hard contact in the air, not a lot of line drives. And because of that, it's getting into his head. So he might be starting to get pull centric, and that's making it. And so he's grounding out a little bit more if he's not flying out. So that's what I think's going on with Juan Soto. That's the problem in my opinion. Am I right? Am I wrong? Who knows? But that's what the numbers do say from what I've looked at. So Soto is still amazing. We are seeing Juan Soto at his worst, and he has about 5.6 B WAR and 4 F WAR. This is his worst I think we'll ever see with Juan Soto. He's only 23 years old. And just to remind you, players older than Juan Soto are Adley Rutschman, Ronald Acuna Jr., Brian Hayes, Jazz Chisholm, Alek Manoah, O'Neal Cruz, Luis Robert, Bo Bichette, Jeremy Pena, and basically a bunch of other prospects and rookies. Juan Soto is really young. And so if he has a 5.6 WAR season this year, that's really impressive that this is his floor. And if you're a collector or investor of Juan Soto, you have to be feeling pretty good about yourself, even though this year was a big disappointment. A lot of Juan Soto's cards have dropped drastically, which I do want to point out as well. If we look right here, we're seeing in the last 6 months, Juan Soto's cards have dropped about 42% according to Card Ladder. Card Ladder takes all 133 of his cards in their platform and lets us know kind of where everything's at. It's dropped about 42% the last 6 months for Juan Soto cards, and in the last year, he's dropped about 20%. So there were some great deals in the offseason last year. I got some great cards, but this year has been a really big disappointment for those that bought in anticipation of him being I think he might have been the Vegas favorite for winning the National League MVP. If we want to look at a specific examples, is Bowman Chromatograph. So the last 2 years, from 2020, he's down 25%. The current value of this card is only $2,000 for his Bowman Chromatograph. If you look at the last 6 months, it's down over 50%. So that's not necessarily ideal. And this card, I think, was going for around $4,600 at one point, and now is down to only about $2,000. I'll probably go under $2,000 here in the offseason as well. I do want to point out him in comparison to his competition this year. I think these are the main four we compare to each other right now. Ronald Acuna Jr., Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and Fernando Tatis Jr. Soto has a 151 OPS plus, Acuna has a 116, Vlad has a 130. Tatis isn't playing this year because of steroids and injury. But I wanted to include him in here to show how much better Juan Soto is doing. On top of that, if we look at WAR, 5.6 for Soto, 2.5 for Acuna, 3.9 for Vlad, and 0 for Tatis. So don't panic on Juan Soto. Do I think he's going to be a bad player? I don't. I can't predict the future. Maybe he doesn't fix these issues he's having. I think he will because he's done this already for the last 5 years. But this is kind of what I'm expecting of Juan Soto, is to have a very cold offseason with his cards, and it could create a good buying opportunity. Do not buy based off of my research. Do your own. If you have the money, don't over leverage yourself on baseball cards. They are baseball cards, and the whole market is soft right now. So to say go buy cards might not be a great idea in general. But either way, if you're looking to buy cards, he could have some upside heading into the season next year, because this is a 151 OPS season. That's basically the same as his career, and that's a 100-point difference here. But because league offense is down as a whole, that's why we're seeing this. So anyways, that's my thoughts on Juan Soto. Let me know in the comments below if you agree, disagree, and what your thoughts are, and I will catch you in the next video.